If you overheard your husband whisper she doesn't know, who would you think he was talking about? I thought I already knew the answer. I was convinced I had uncovered his secret family. But the next few minutes changed everything. The woman I expected to hear on the other phone, the end of the other phone, wasn't the woman from that cafe. That was the moment I realized I had been asking the wrong questions all along. I stood outside the kitchen, afraid to breathe. My heart pounded against my chest as I listened carefully. My husband kept his voice very low, almost as if he didn't want anyone else in the room to hear him. I could only catch a few words. No, not yet. Then there was a pause. I'll handle it. Another pause followed before he quietly said, I said she doesn't know. I leaned closer, hoping to hear one more sentence, but instead, I heard footsteps coming towards me. He was already ending the call. I quickly walked back to the seats in the living room and sat down just before he came out from the kitchen. My hands folded tightly on my lap, but inside, I was trembling. He smiled as if nothing happened. Sorry about that, he said. I nodded and forced a smile. No problem. He sat beside me, and for the first time since we got married, I noticed something I had never seen before. He looked exhausted, not because he hadn't slept, but because something seemed to be weighing heavy on him. We sat in silence for a few moments before he reached over and gently held my hand. I'm sorry I've been busy lately, he said softly. He squeezed my hand gently before letting it go. I searched his face, hoping it would reveal something I had missed all these years. But instead, I saw a man who looked tired. Not physically tired, but emotionally drained. He wasn't the face of someone celebrating a secret life. It was the face of someone carrying a burden alone. I promised, he said quietly, things would settle down soon. I wanted to ask him what he meant by that. I wanted to ask who he had just called. I wanted to ask about the woman from the cafe, the little girl, the cream-colored bungalow, and the words I overheard. But I couldn't. Every question remained trapped inside me. A few minutes later, he stood up. I'm going to take a shower, he said, as he picked up a towel. He slipped his phone into the pocket of his trouser he had taken off earlier and left them hanging over the arm of the sofa before heading upstairs. A few seconds later, I heard the bathroom door close, followed by the sound of the running water. I remained where I was, staring at the staircase. My conscience told me to leave his things alone. But another part of me reminded me that this was the same man who had a key to another woman's house. So, slowly I stood up. I glanced upstairs once more before picking up his trousers. My hands were shaking as I searched through the pockets. The first pocket held only his car keys. The second one contained a few receipts, folded. And then my fingers touched a small piece of paper tucked neatly into the back pocket. I unfolded it carefully. It was a pharmacy receipt. At first, it looked ordinary. The name of the pharmacy was printed across the top, followed by a long list of medications that I couldn't even pronounce. My eyes moved slowly down the page until they stopped on one word: chemotherapy. I blinked, then read again: chemotherapy. The word refused to change. The receipt looked recent. The paper was still crisp. The ink hadn't even begun to fade. My husband hardly ever stepped into a pharmacy. Even when he had a simple headache, he would complain for 2 days before agreeing to buy painkillers. So why was he carrying a receipt with chemotherapy medications on it? I knew one thing almost immediately. Those medications weren't for him. They had to belong to someone else. But who? The woman from the cafe? The little girl? The woman whose voice I overheard on the phone? Or was there someone else I knew nothing about? A cold feeling settled in my chest. Whoever those medications belonged to, they weren't being treated for an ordinary illness. I carefully folded the receipt exactly the way I found it and slipped it back into his back pocket. Just then, I heard the bathroom door open upstairs. I quickly returned the trousers to the sofa and sat down before he walked into the living room drying his hair with a towel. "You didn't rest?" he asked. "I wasn't sleepy," I replied. He smiled faintly. "I'll make us something to eat," he said. I watched him walk into the kitchen. His movements were different, slower. He stopped more than once as though he had forgotten what he wanted to do. Twice, I noticed him rub the bridge of his nose before taking a deep breath and continuing. Everything about him felt heavy. Whatever he was carrying, he wasn't getting any lighter. We ate dinner quietly that evening. Normally, one of us would have found something to laugh about before the meal was over. But that night, silence was between us. It wasn't an angry silence. It was the silence of two people sitting in the same room while living in completely different worlds. Halfway through the dinner, his phone vibrated. He looked at the screen for barely a second before standing up. "I'll be back," he said softly. Instead of answering the call inside the house, he walked through the back door into the compound. I waited a few seconds before quietly making my way into the kitchen. And from the kitchen window, I could see part of the backyard. He stood near the fence with his back turned towards the house, the phone pressed against his ear. I couldn't hear what was being said. I could only watch. At first, he spoke, and then he became quiet. He lowered his head and simply listened. Several seconds passed without saying a word. Then, I saw something I never imagined I would see. He lifted his hand to his face. At first, I thought he was rubbing his eyes. And then, he slowly wiped across both cheeks. He was crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly wiping away tears before anyone could see them. I stood frozen. I had known this man for 6 years. I had seen him lose his father. I had seen us lose a pregnancy. I had watched him go through disappointments that would have broken many people. Not once had I seen him cry. Yet, here he was, standing alone in the dark, trying to hide his tears from the rest of the world. A few moments later, he took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, wiped his face one last time and forced a smile before walking back towards the house. My heart skipped. He was coming inside the house. I hurried away from the kitchen window and rushed back into the living room. I picked up the television remote and pretended to scroll through the channels just as the back door opened. "You found something interesting to watch?" he asked with a tired smile. I looked up briefly and shrugged. "Not really. I'm just passing time." He nodded and sat beside me as though nothing happened. If I hadn't watched him through that kitchen window, I would have never believed he had been crying only seconds earlier. Later that night, we got ready for bed. The bedroom was unusually quiet. He lay down first, and within minutes, his breathing became slow. and steady. I turned slightly and looked at him. His face looked calm, almost peaceful. I couldn't understand it. How could someone carrying so much inside him fall asleep so easily? Then again, maybe he wasn't sleeping because he had peace. Maybe he was simply exhausted. The man lying beside me no longer looked like the husband I had left the house with that morning. He looked like someone carrying a weight too heavy to share. Sleep refused to come. I lay awake, staring into the darkness, replaying everything that had happened since my sister's phone call delayed me by 5 minutes. If I hadn't answered that call, I would never have gone to the office. I would never have seen him at the cafe. I would never have followed him to that cream-colored bungalow. I would never have heard that little girl call him daddy. I would never have overheard another woman's voice on the phone. I would never have found a pharmacy receipt with the word chemotherapy printed across it. And I would never have seen my husband standing alone outside, quietly wiping tears from his face. Nothing made sense anymore. Every answer only created another question. The more I tried to put these pieces together, the less they seemed to fit. Just then, the silence was broken by the soft vibration of his phone on the bedside table. The screen lit up. Without thinking, my eyes drifted towards it. A message appeared on the lock screen. She's getting weak. I felt my heart skip. That was all it said. No name, no explanation, just 3 words. She's getting weak. I slowly turned to look at my husband. He didn't move. His breathing remained steady. He had no idea another piece of his secret had just appeared before my eyes. I looked back at the phone. Who was she? The woman from the cafe? The little girl? The woman whose voice I overheard earlier on the phone? Or someone I hadn't even met? Then, my thoughts returned to the pharmacy receipt. Chemotherapy. For the first time that day, those 2 things felt connected. I lay awake until the morning without sleeping. By sunrise, I knew one thing for certain. I had spent the whole day trying to uncover one secret. Instead, I had stumbled into something much bigger. And somehow, everyone seemed to know what was happening, except me.